Okay. Well, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We are here to talk about IRA. IRA is, a big topic. It is or it will affect everybody in this room in one or many ways. And though CLEAResult has a lot of experience in IRA as far as is kind of possible at this point, there's one thing for sure that we know, which is that there is a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot that I think nobody knows. So, one of the specific topics that we keep bumping into and really want to focus on with this panel is the topic of braiding and the subsequent savings attribution that comes to that. We have had some states indicate, this hasn't come to fruition yet for sure, but indicate that they are not going to allow their utilities in their state to claim savings derived from IRA offerings. And that poses a lot of challenges and complexities. And so, what are the considerations that we want to put forth and that we should be thinking of when designing these programs, when participating, partnering in these programs, when educating our customers about these programs? So that's the conversation that we want to have today. There are a lot of kind of like tactical, practical complexities with savings attributions. How does that actually occur when you have different implementers running different programs, when some of the offerings are in competition, which one comes first? So there's a lot there. And this doesn't just apply to IRA. There are a lot of different examples, right? You might have a low-income program through a utility, and then also have a weatherization program through the state. And I think probably Yvonne has experience with that. And so there's a lot of different examples that we can learn from and also solve for going forward relating to braiding and savings attribution. So we have a great panel of experts today. But first, I'm going to hand it over to Keith to introduce himself to the probably 3 or 4 people in this room that don't already know him. And he's going to give a brief overview of kind of where we're at from a state perspective and then hand it off to the rest.
Thank you, Jessica. Hello, everybody. I was a little surprised that when Jessica said there was a state that was not going to allow utility savings attribution, there wasn't a single boo from the audience. So I'm going to take that as maybe you're just still in the lunch food coma, and that will work itself out. But my name's Keith Canfield. I'm a program director in the Central Region, which for CLEAResult is a non-Rand McNally approved 22 states that go from New Mexico all the way to the Carolinas. So I'm also a member of the IRA implementation team for CLEAResult. So I get to play around a little bit outside the Central Region every once in a while, but please don't tell Jeremy Townsend. So I'm going to be talking today a little bit about some of the things. Part of my work with the IRA implementation team is talking to regulators and public service commissions and evaluators about how they're looking at these savings that are going to be coming from the IRA and how they're thinking about how utilities will be allowed to claim those savings or not in the cases of some states. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that and probably delve into some other areas as well. I've been in energy efficiency about 20 years. I've been with CLEAResult the last 8. And before that, in my previous life, back in the ARA years, if several of you are old enough to remember those funds, I was both a DOE and EPA grantee under those grants. So I've lived through this fun roller coaster before, and I'll probably share a few war stories with you there. So with that, go to the next slide. I just thought we'd take a minute and talk about where the IRA implementation is now. I mean, it's taken a long time, right? This has been legislation for 2 years and 2 months. And you can see from the slide here, there's only 6 live programs in the country right now. We've launched the only operating homes or efficiency program, and that's in Wisconsin. The other 5 are some small electrification, kind of appliance electrification type programs. So what the heck has taken so long, right? It's a convoluted process. After the legislation, it took DOE a full year to release their guidance just to tell the states how to apply. And since then, you can see about half the states have actually submitted their applications. The other half have until January 31st of 2025 to do so. There's only one state that has opted out of the program altogether. Anybody know who that state is?
South Dakota.
Correct. South Dakota is the only one that has officially opted out. Despite all the bluster and hubbub you may have heard over the last 2 years, they're the only ones that have said they're not taking the money. So allegedly, that $69 million that was theirs will go back into the pot and be distributed to the other states. But as you see, there's still plenty to do. We really haven't felt the full brunt of what $9 billion in incentives are going to do to your programs when it comes into the market. So we're going to be talking about that in all its different ways, and as well as Jessica mentioned, whether you call it braiding, stacking, layering, co-funding, commingling, whatever you want to call it, the way that these different funding sources come in and how the attribution is spread between those is what we're going to talk about. In fact, somebody that already has experience with that is Yvonne, so I'll let her introduce herself.
Good afternoon. Oh, that didn't work. Good afternoon. Yvonne Lewis from Consumers Energy. I am the Income Qualified Senior Product Manager running the Income Qualified program, and I have a lot of experience in braiding, leveraging, commingling, all the things with many nonprofits and groups across Michigan. And I love this work. I too have been in this industry for about 20 years and bring a plethora of experience. I'm a licensed builder. I actually did energy audits, et cetera, and lived through ARA. And so no, and we can't make the same mistakes that we learned from ARA. They didn't feel like mistakes during ARA. We did a good job, but when you look at hindsight, we left a little bit of a trail. And I'm really hoping that the IRA dollars and teams like this can ensure that we learned from that and we move forward and make a process that everyone can be proud of. But I'm anxious to learn all with you. I have been on this boat for 2 years and 2 months, just anxiously awaiting, and I'm really happy for Michigan. CLEAResult is our implementation contractor, and that will make my life easier.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Belay, Vice President of Customer Experience at Pearl Certification. Just a quick little, if you don't know what Pearl is, we certify high-performing energy features in a home and tie those assets to the valuation through the real estate transaction. Most of the reason that I'm on this panel has to do with my 20 years in the energy efficiency space, really focused on the public-private intersection. That really is the contractors who deliver on those improvements that are necessary for the rebates to be issued and those savings to come to reality. And the very complex, challenging framework that you all have to operate within as you are designing these programs. I have spent a lot of time, I have a lot of passion for the contractor side of things. Actually ran the Efficiency First Trade Association for a number of years before it merged with the Builder Performance Association, and I spent a lot of time in contractor shops, understanding some of the really critical challenges that come with, from the day-to-day business elements and then the layering of what programs can bring and the complexities and challenges it can make for them to be able to participate in it. And I will hand it over to Erin.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Erin Cosgrove. I'm the Senior Manager of Policy and Programs at Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, or NEEP. I'll give a little background on NEEP first. We're a regional energy efficiency organization. There's one, we call them RIOs, Regional Energy Efficiency Org, in every aspect of the country. So if you are in a state, you have a RIO. And we actually exist to help states implement energy efficiency programs. Each RIO does it slightly differently, but we work directly with the state energy offices in our region to help them design their energy efficiency programs, and now more so think about building decarbonization. And in relation to this, we've actually been meeting with our state energy offices on a monthly basis to check in with how they're doing with IRA rebate program applications. And I will now kind of segue into what my presentation for this. We also just recently released a report on how to attribute savings when it comes to IRA programs. And we're hoping that we can have this discussion with IRA, but I think we're seeing that a lot of states are looking at ways to leverage funding when it comes to energy efficiency programs. And I think attribution is going to be a big conversation here and even in the future. So with that, I'll go ahead and kind of set the stage for our discussion. So first, I'm going to talk about what attribution is, just to kind of level set to make sure everyone's using the same terminology and starting at the same base point. So when I say attribution of IRA program savings, I'm speaking of when a utility implements a program, they are allowed to claim savings initially. I think it's also known as gross savings, but I don't want to get too technical. With IRA rebate programs, there's an opportunity for the utility and whoever the implementer is, or for IRA rebate funds, to both come into that program to fund the upgrade. And we want to talk about how we attribute savings when both of those funding sources are combined. And then why is attribution important? And now I'll go to the slide deck. It's important because it determines how program administrators can take credit for savings from funds. So a lot of states have existing program administrators, and they are nervous, anxious, and also excited about IRA programs because they will have an impact on the current energy efficiency markets, and we're not sure how they're going to allocate those funds and how it's going to change their ability to meet their goals. And then also blending programs and also operating programs that fund the same measures can actually make it more difficult to understand what caused the savings to occur. And for utilities, it's important that they're able to show that they caused savings to occur because that's what they're mandated to do. That's why they have energy efficiency programs, and they have a lot of regulations around that. So it's important to make it clear that make it clear when it comes to attribution, how the savings are going to be allocated from this new funding source to streamline and make sure that everyone can actually come to the table and have a conversation about how programs can coordinate. And so I'll just jump over to what are the benefits of getting this right. Is first off, if you talk about attribution, I kind of see it, and we'll talk more in the panel about this, but it's kind of a starting point for coordination from that point on. If you are able to meet with the program administrators and allocate attribution, that kind of opens the table up and is able to coordinate all of the resources that are at their hands. It also allows utilities or program administrators to earn credits for savings that are generated from non-ratepayer funds. More increasingly, states are looking to invest in more energy efficiency and building decarbonization programs, and there's going to be a lot of funding coming in. And I think with IRA and with other programs, it'll be important to understand how the savings are going to be allocated, and if an administrator is able to leverage other funds, if they're able to claim those savings, because it's important that we were able to create a bigger rebate for the customer and then unlock the savings. So you have to think about how to value that. It also removes concern about competition. For the paper, we actually gathered a group of EM&V experts and utilities, and there is a lot of concern in the industry, I'm sure in this room, that when IRA programs are implemented, it'll create competition, and it means that there'll be less of a savings pool for existing programs, and we want to figure out how to actually coordinate and not compete with each other. And then finally, talking about attribution with existing programs provides market transformation opportunities. It provides an opportunity to push a program to maybe do something it hasn't done before, to explore a new area, or to invest in market transformation as opposed to energy, in addition to the regular energy efficiency programs that we see states investing in. And then finally, I'll just queue up our conversation with attribution frameworks that we came up with in our report, and I'll kind of walk through them and give an example of each just to lay the land. But so basically, our report came out, and we found 4 ways that states have used attribution in the past when they've coordinated funding together. And we pulled examples from when ARA was implemented, because it is very similar to what we're seeing right now. Codes funding is also another area where we've seen attribution come up. And then a final area is when programs blend together in order to implement a single seamless consumer-facing program. So I'll go through the 4 buckets and provide examples of kind of each of those. The first bucket to think about attribution in is full attribution, and that's when a program administrator would receive full credit for all of the savings that come from a project. This example is actually taken from ARA and blending that we've seen between utility program administrators and low-income programs or weatherization assistance programs. So one example under this is actually in Illinois. The utilities work with the weatherization assistant program administrators, and the utility provides administrative support, marketing, and then a certain amount of funding, up to 50% of the upgrade. And in exchange for bringing all of those qualities to the program and coordinating, they are fully attributed any savings that stems from a weatherization assistance project. And it means that the customer doesn't pick and choose between a utility and a WAP program. They have one program, and they're able to leverage all of those resources. Proportional attribution is something we see more so when, for example, utilities have overlapping territories and energy efficiency programs. There's an agreement for how to allocate the savings to make sure that only a proportion of the funds are allocated. For IRA programs, proportional attribution would look something like if we have a $10,000 heat pump rebate, IRA contributes $8,000, the utility contributes $2,000. Instead of receiving the full allocation of funds that they would have received, they'll only receive 20% of the funding. So there could be a significant decrease in what a program administrator might see as a result of the program. Another bucket that we see around attribution is something called negotiated attribution. And this can range anywhere from proportional to full attribution of savings for a program. But oftentimes what will happen on the back end is the PUC, State Energy Office, the program administrator, and other stakeholders will outline the requirements that they would like to see the utility hit. This happens a lot when utilities decide to implement codes programs. Because codes are a new area, what they will do is they'll outline certain benchmarks like trainings, circuit riders, or helping to evaluate whether or not a code will improve or be cost effective. And if a utility or program implementer is able to hit those targets, they are guaranteed to receive a portion of savings that they already know about. So negotiated allows for program implementers to know what targets they need to hit and understand what savings they will get from it without any kind of gray areas. And then the final bucket we hit on in the paper is no attribution, which Keith kind of touched on in his introduction. And that's where the current program implementer won't receive any allocation of savings. I can say that in the past, we've seen states do this when they want to invest a lot in market transformation programs that perhaps the utility isn't actually implementing or not in the space of. We also have an example from ARA. It was New York. They implemented 2 of the same program. So NYSERDA had ARA rebates, and the utilities had utility rebates for the same item, and customers had to choose. And I think NYSERDA, the takeaway from that was that they decided to not do that anymore because it created confusion. And they did it because they didn't want to talk about attribution. But I think in the end, if you have this conversation to begin with, it unlocks doors so that the customer and the contractor, which we'll touch on, only see one program and interact with one program. And it ensures that on the back end, everyone's allocated the savings and is able to provide all of the resources that already exist. Because coordination also opens up the utilities network for the contractors, marketing, and customers that already exist, which can really help expedite IRA rebates. And with that, I'll pause and we can go to our questions.
I just want to open it up before we kind of dive in deeper and just see from a kind of preliminary standpoint. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts in response, especially to what Erin just said? Okay.
Can I lay out a scenario that
Of
might get a
course.
response? So, Erin described a heat pump, $10,000 heat pump, $2,000 rebate from the utility, $8,000 from the here side of these programs, and the utility only gets to claim 20% of those savings. Right now, if somebody takes advantage of your $2,000 rebate, you get to claim all the savings. So think about that for a second. You're still investing the same amount of money, same processing cost for that rebate, but you're going to get 20% of the savings. Oh, and by the way, they're probably going to be using your contractor network that you spent a decade training to do this work. Does that bother anybody?
I think we have a response. Do you want to respond?
So from a utility perspective, a lot of utilities have cost effectiveness testing, right?
Yes.
And in low-income programs, sometimes it doesn't apply the same way. You know, your TRC might not have to be 1, et cetera. But I can tell you, talking to a lot of different EDCs across like the state where I'm from in Pennsylvania, this conversation has come up a lot. And to your point around, like, we have a network, we have marketing already out there, and it would be a huge missed opportunity because a lot of EDCs would not participate, would not help if that were the case. And so I think that would cause like the IRA rollout to potentially be stalled, and it could also create customer confusion, which is one of my biggest concerns. So yeah, from that standpoint, I think attribution has to be there if you want utilities to come to the table, because otherwise they might not be able to participate from a cost effectiveness standpoint, or they're completely disincentivized from doing so.
So Tom, that's a good comment. Who's making that decision in Pennsylvania? Is it the feds are going to dictate it, or the state government? Who's going to decide ultimately?
I will say there is a tremendous amount of confusion on this, and you know, in even just a recent meeting, there was mixed messaging on what attribution was going to look like from the federal level. They said there's going to be none, and the state level said no, that's probably a mistake. Let's go to we're going to talk about it and we're going to figure it out. I think along with a lot of states, everything's a question mark still.
I could just add some clarification that in writing the report, we had many conversations with DOE about this. And what we understand is that DOE is not looking for any attribution of savings. So I think it comes down to how the state wants to allocate the savings that will stem from the IRA home energy rebates. The states have to report to DOE the amount of savings that come from homes and the amount of efficient appliances that are put in homes for here. But right now it's kind of like there's a savings pool that's open to be taken and to be allocated, but DOE does not want it. So the states can now figure out if they want to kind of take it down to their implementers.
And I'll add, I am actively the IT lead implementing IRA in Wisconsin and Michigan right now. And what we've experienced is that the confusion that Tom references, that's very widespread. It's everywhere, and it's every person involved in the process. And so my perspective is really in all things that I have purview over, which is primarily IT, but my recommendation to everybody is to be really a persuasive consultant about this. And so I would encourage both CLEAResult on the implementation side, but also the other partners here to really think about what do you want to happen? Not maybe in a dream world where it's full attribution to you specifically, right? But like realistically, what do you want to happen? I think that not only the DOE, but states would love somebody that knows what they're talking about to actually come help and facilitate those decisions, because right now there's a lot of groups that are like, well, I've not really done this kind of work before, and I've been tasked to kind of run this program on behalf of the state. So I think it's a real opportunity for us to say, how do we think this should work in each particular state, and try to get buy-in through that process. Any other questions, comments?
I would just add, all right, I would add so for Consumers Energy as a utility, we want to participate. We want to be part of what's going on. We need the savings, right? That's what our dollars do. But We're talking, so I run the income qualified program, but even on the market rate side, in Michigan, let's say a cold climate heat pump averages between $15,000 and $20,000 to install. So even with the 8,500, which is kind of what's been thrown around right now as the rebate, and let's say the utility on a market rate puts in a couple thousand, or on income qualified, we come to the table with maybe three or, double that. Who are we putting in place for our customer base to pick up the rest? Because whether you're market rate or income qualified, you may not have the credit score or the ability. So we have to remember that we still have that gap, and customers are going to be looking to us to show them how to fill that gap.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, is that you don't make the homeowner have to navigate that, right? It's just an easy process that they follow. And the contractor doesn't have to be that translator. It's something that's just very seamless for both the contractor and the homeowner.
And I think in that exact line of thought, we know that this process, and for today's discussion focused on attribution, kind of the front end of that, which is, well, what's my utility giving me? What am I getting from consumers? What am I getting from the state of Michigan? What am I getting from a WAP program, right? Those kind of considerations are not just complex for us being in this industry and actually, kind of having expertise in this, but definitely for the customers and the contractors participating. So, what considerations should teams and states be thinking about, as they're going through the design phase?
Yeah, go ahead, Yvonne, I'll go after you.
For the WAP program, we have to remember, too, that a customer may not be able to be brought up to the top of the line because of a wait list. So is that something we need to talk to the individual community action agencies about, or the state, to allow that customer maybe just to be moved for the electrification side, the heat pump side, and then put back on the list for the weatherization side? Or are we, how many angry customers will they have that get, moved down the line because of this funding? So that's a key thing to remember will they allow that?
Yeah, there's a few things that come to mind for me. The first is that with IRA, utilities have a very complex framework you have to navigate already. And we're now adding essentially 2 more layers of bureaucracy to it. You have DOE, who, by the way, revises their guidance, every 3 months? Something like that, which makes it really challenging to design.
Much more frequently than that.
Yes, so it makes it really difficult to actually design programs. Then you have the state energy offices, and then you have the utilities, and then you have the implementers, and then you have the contractor, and then you have the homeowner. And each one of those constituents has a level of regulatory elements that they have to abide by. And so if you're not careful, you end up designing these programs that no one is going to be able to participate in. I love that earlier Todd referenced the NPR story about the NPR reporter trying to figure out if their heat pump qualified for the tax credits, which, by the way, he never actually figured out. We cannot have that be the experience of the homeowner in these situations. A lot of the IRA programs are focused on underserved communities, and those communities are underserved for a reason, right? There's either no contractors there, or they're contractors who are, barely holding it together from a business perspective. Maybe they're great at their trade, and they need a lot of support to be able to then actually meet the requirements of these programs. And as you are looking at whether or not you're working with the states, which I strongly encourage you to do, to think about how you can leverage the resources you have to not just provide workforce development opportunities, but also just the infrastructure to make sure those companies thrive at the outset. I was also around during Recovery Act days, and that was a really big miss looking back, that we trained a lot of people to be able to do blower door tests, and then the market bottomed out when the money ran out. So really making sure there's a framework to support them once this money is gone.
Pile onto that I think what you just said about how after the money ran out, the market also bottomed out. We have programs that exist now, so that doesn't have to happen, which is why it's important that coordination on the back end and with current program implementers occurs now, because it is very real that all of a sudden, like, one program might disappear, and then at the same time, if there isn't actually coordination between the utilities and the state energy office, maybe the utility just stopped investing so much into the work because of the competition. I don't think that would happen necessarily, but there is a real threat that if coordination doesn't occur on the back end, it could actually lead to very similar to what we saw earlier with the Recovery Act. And I think I also just wanted to emphasize that we have examples, and they're in the paper, of when groups have come together and signed an MOU on attribution so that there is one seamless customer experience, even if it is a sharing of resources, which I don't think happens when it comes to IRA, that we need to allocate the savings on both sides. But one example to pull from is the WAP example I used earlier in Illinois. And then also Vermont has I participated in it and didn't know. It was a dual-funded midstream consumer program from the Green Mountain Power, our utility, and from our efficiency implementer. And they signed an MOU on the back end, just understanding it's more powerful to have one consumer-facing program, which has enabled them to be one of the top installing heat pump states in the nation. But it was it was clearing that up and understanding that it's better if they pull funding together first.
Yeah, I think I'd just add one thing, and that is that the framework that Erin and NEEP have provided with this paper is really helpful for having these conversations with your regulators and your energy office. In fact, I'm going to do a poll. I didn't use the app, so sorry, marketing. But how many of you feel like in your states right now that you're having these kind of discussions about how savings are going to be attributed when these funds hit the market? Okay. So that's, well, or you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So that's the rule, or it's not the exception. That seems to be what's happening across the country, and a lot of it is I'll give you a real live state example. A lot of it is kind of circular logic. There was a public service commission in a southern state. They asked their independent evaluator to add an analysis of the impact of the IRA funds on ratepayer funded efficiency programs. So the evaluator asked the consultant doing the potential study to add that to their work. Consultant reached out to all the utilities and said, hey, what do you think the impact of these funds are going to be over the next 7 years? And the utilities, quite correctly, said, we don't know, because the Energy Office hadn't produced a plan or shared with us a plan on how these programs may roll out, and even which one of the programs or both that they're going to apply for. So it went all the way back around, and then the Energy Office said, well, of course, whatever we do with the plan, DOE has to approve, so we can't communicate anything until DOE has approved the plan. So giant circular logic, so nobody's doing anything. And I think what this framework will at least give you is an ability, even without the details, without knowing which measures they're going to write into the state plan and what the exact funding levels are, you can now go in and just talk about a theoretic framework about, regardless of what the funding levels are and that stacking, braiding, layering, how are the savings going to be attributed to the different players? Because again, I think it's really important for utilities who've been in this market incubating these programs for decades in many cases to receive more than just a proportional, and here, Erin and I are going to have it out here on stage maybe, but more than a proportional attribution based on strictly the financial contributions that each make. I think there's more there that the utilities need to be compensated for, but whether that's if there's an additional adder, so if you're contributing 20% of the incentive, you may have an adder that's additional 10% on top of that for you to be able to claim for the enabling the contractor network or the processing of the rebates. But if you don't get in there and start having those conversations, it will never enter the conversation at all. So that's probably what I want to try to encourage this group out of the session today is that, yes, I get it. Nobody's talking about this, but it's probably going to be you that have to, or your public affairs folks that are going to have to start that conversation, at the regulator level or the PSC level to really, kind of break out of this circular logic.
Just to add to that, and Jessica touched on this too, the states will welcome this. Like most of the state energy offices are way in over their heads and they know it, and they would love to have the support to figure these really complex issues that you all have been living and breathing for many years, so that they don't have to. And I think that would create an even more favorable environment from an attribution perspective, especially if they can leverage the framework that you have already, hard fought to build.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it really can't be overstated, anecdotally for sure, but I think it's probably representative of a significant percentage. The SEOs that we're working with, it's 1 or 2 people. And these people, a current client I have says, I don't have time to read emails. If you need something from me, you have to send me a text message. And that's legit, and so the more that we can do, because we really know what we're talking about. And I don't mean we as in we. This whole room, we know EE, right? And so we know what works. We know the markets. We know the customers and the contractors. And so, yeah, it's a very welcome thing, I'm sure. Any questions or reactions from the group? Anything you want to ask this panel? Yeah. We can hardly see
Mike's
all
help.
of you guys.
Thank you.
With
Yeah.
the lights.
I wanted to build off of what Erin had to say about the customer experience piece, and I think that's that maybe we're all thinking it, but I feel like it needs to be stated that these programs are designed particularly to benefit a disadvantaged group of people, right? And so if we go forward, and the last thing we want to see is for this to fail and have a bad customer experience, but even lower on that list, behind the last thing, is like for the bad experience to disproportionately affect already disadvantaged populations. At that point, it won't matter whose fault it is. Like, we all have like an ethical and optical responsibility to make sure that it doesn't go that way. So I just wanted to kind of call that out as that's a concern that I have about this process.
Yvonne shared something in the prior session that I think less than half of you were in. I don't know if that's, you want to share about.
I was going to jump right in, and
Great.
thank you. At the top of your list, when you're putting your program together, you have to put the word education. If you're not educated, your trade ally is not educated on these concepts, your customer will never be. And I've had an experience where our interveners had us install cold climate heat pumps, and we all jumped on board, and we installed them in a frenzy, and we met our goal, and it was great, and it was all for income qualified customers. But we had to train our trade allies as we went, and our implementation contractor as we went, and we forgot to train our customer on how to use the systems. And so we've gone back, and we realized that, and closed the program and didn't install anymore for 2 years almost I'm at now, and we're just making them right. We went back, we're doing tune-ups, we're talking to them about maintenance and what you need to do to run them properly. So learn from that and put education at the top of your list, even if you have to spend 6 months doing that before you install your first one. Make sure your trade allies know what they're doing, that you've selected a trade ally that perhaps your supplier has recommended because they've been through some internal trainings. Make sure your implementation contractor has a passion for the customer and the marketing and the leave behinds that you leave for a customer, and that they understand what they're getting. I also mentioned that many of our customers don't have air conditioning, and now we've installed air conditioning, and we showed them, we told them we were giving them this product to lower their bills. But now we've given them air conditioning, and heck, I'd use it. And so all summer now they're getting a bill that they never had before, which is a beautiful thing that air conditioning is needed, especially in Michigan now with, it was 82 2 weeks ago, and normally it's sweater weather. So please put that education at the top of your list. I made a disclaimer sheet, and that's what we call it internally, but it's, a checkoff sheet for the customer where they initial, where that kitchen table conversation happens so that there's an understanding of what they got. Because still all winter now, everything's going to say in Michigan, and even we probably as a utility will put this out, lower your thermostat. And for every 2 degrees, you get a 3% decrease or something. Turn it down at night, turn it back up in the morning. You can't with heat pumps. It's set it and leave it. But we don't say that. We're not saying that yet. So please, I'm just going to push that one home.
I think that's such a great point, Yvonne. There's a few other components that you made me think about. I focus a little more on the market side of things. And IRA is not designed for emergency changeouts, right? Like you can't go install a heat pump when your furnace is just broken and you need heat. There's, if there's fuel switching, you have to educate the homeowner on how to use it properly. Good luck making sure you have a technician that knows how to install it properly, depending on where you are in the country. So there's this whole framework that needs to be in place to educate the homeowner before they are in that emergency situation so that they might make that decision. The other thing that comes to mind is that we don't want to punish the homeowner in those situations where they are in an emergency and they need to make a decision. Help them make that decision as easily as possible. One other point that I wanted to make is around engage, especially if you're working in underserved communities, to work with community-based organizations, CBOs, to build the trust, to help you understand how to educate those communities. If you look different than that community, chances are it's going to be harder for you to actually communicate and get their trust if you're not working with organizations that support them in a different way. And the other piece that I think is important across the board here is there's this inherent behavioral element that I feel like gets lost when we're talking about people. People they're not making rational choices when their furnace is out, or even when they're looking at what opportunities are available for rebates, right? They're making decisions, they're deciding between whether or not to, in a true market rate, like, are we gonna go on this family vacation, or are we gonna install a heat pump, right? Like, that's where the competition really lies. And I would encourage you to think about and even engage with people who understand the behavioral elements of how consumers operate to help you think through how to get through to them so they make different choices.
I think I saw another question back there in the lights in the back somewhere. Does somebody else have their hand up?
Hi, Rima Vashi from CLEAResult. I was wondering if you can share some thoughts about, it's very obvious that we want to make participation easy and simple, but I think one of the things that we're going to struggle with is we've been doing this for the past few decades, right? Utilities have been doing this. And then here's, the new requirements coming down from the DOE and then the state energy offices. A lot of these requirements at the measure level are quite simple versus some of the utility programs might be more complex, for example, SEER levels and just the level of requirements needed to participate in a specific program versus the requirements that are conflicting or not the same or matching with what the DOE is requiring. So I guess when you're thinking about making things simple and easy, how are we going to fundamentally change the design of our programs that we have ran for so many years to align with what needs to happen?
I'll jump in on that one because there's, again, bruises from our years. There was in one state, there was an existing program that had been in the market for a decade, and it was based on incenting furnaces that were 95.5 or higher. The Energy Office put in a furnace rebate, and it was 95. So if you put in a 95 and it wasn't 95.5, you didn't qualify for the existing rebate. And guess who they were mad at? You know, it was the existing the utility that had that existing rebate that had been in the market for a decade. They felt like, you know, that there was that was poorly planned on their part, and when the opposite was true. So that harmonization is critical. Not only in measures, but also in contractor base. So you've got trained contractors. You know, you have various requirements of those contractors, from training to BPI standards and everything else. The DOE requires for the IRA programs that there is a qualified contractor list. So what if this qualified contractor list comes out from the DOE and the standards are, whatever they are, they're different than what your contractors have to do? They're probably going to be mad, you know, for good reason, but they shouldn't be mad at you. But you know, again, there's the opportunity there for some hurt feelings and kind of wasted opportunity. So another thing that kind of getting in and engaging with the state energy offices now, you know, either while they're putting their plan together or you know, while it's being approved by DOE, and really addressing some of those things, getting your programs to be, you know, if you've got low-income programs, trying to get them on the categorical eligibility list so that, you know, your customers who've gone through your low-income program are eligible automatically. They don't have to prove their income again for the DOE. That's a real benefit to you, makes you look like a you know, proactive and helping those disadvantaged customers even more than you already have. And the same is true with contractors. Get in there and try to discuss, you know, even offering maybe the qualifications that you have in your contractor program to be the ones that the state adopts for their qualified contractor list. So, you know, it's difficult because I know they're not coming to you and asking for your opinions on these things, but there is an opportunity, and as you guys all mentioned, you know, that they really do want to have that input, because honestly, otherwise it's just going to be, you know, either an accountant or somebody down the organizational process pulls something off Google, and that becomes the what's in the state plan.
Yeah, I'll double down on the collaboration piece. I think that's, you got to get in the room with the utility, the state energy office, and any of the other players in California. There's like 30 of them. To really hash that out and to help the state energy office understand. The other point I'll just make, or offer I'll make, is if you don't know who your state energy office person is, I bet between Keith and Jess and myself, we can probably help you identify that person so that you can make that connection. So I know they're completely different worlds, but happy to support that.
Oh, and then I'll just add in, if no one else here can help you, that's also what the RIOs are for, the Regional Energy Efficiency Organizations. We have contacts at every state energy office. And just kind of going off of what Keith said, right now, I think everything is fluid. Everything can be changed, and nothing is set in stone. And from what I have been able to discern, even contractor certifications, a state could walk in and ask for certain ones. The problem is the state's not sure which ones to ask for. DOE's not sure which ones to require. So if you can get in touch with your state energy office, I think it's immensely helpful in ways that I don't know that we'd really understand, because they are just trying to figure out best practices. And sometimes the best way to do that is to hear from people on the ground. But sometimes they're hesitant also to just kind of go outside of their space. But it's very valuable if you're able to talk to them, and one of us can help you get in touch with them.
I think that's exactly right, Erin. You know, what I've seen kind of on the ground is the baseline DOE requirements of contractors, not just from a qualification standpoint, but from a project submission standpoint. The rigor is pretty high. And we have heard and expressed many concerns that the market is not going to accept some of the rules. Things like on an invoice to a customer, you have to itemize by measure the equipment cost and the labor cost separately. And we're like, the market's going to have a problem with that. And so, to their credit, the DOE and PNNL have been very willing to have those discussions. I think everybody wants to do the right thing. I think what the right thing is a matter of opinion and experience. And so I think to the extent that you can understand within your state or states, what are those rules? And maybe not at the level of the example I gave, but what are those requirements? What are those certifications and licenses that either the DOE is recommending or that have been filed on a pre-application or an application? And if you know from your experience, in the field, that that's going to be a barrier or something that is going to cause dissatisfaction or friction between between EE requirements and IRA requirements, they want to hear that feedback, and I think that's the right way to go about it, is for you on the utility side to say, hey, we know what we're talking about, and this is going to be a problem. Here's the better way we think you can approach it.
I have two more points.
Of course.
So the first is that IRA requires the states to have stakeholder meetings. So number one, please look for those and attend them. I think that your voice is super important in this. I knew I was going to forget the second point. Oh, DOE, for better or worse, is very willing to change their guidance. Maybe a little too willing, but they also want to get this right. Like, they don't want a repeat of Recovery Act. So they're very open. So don't take that DOE guidance as gospel by any means. There's definitely opportunity to influence that and inform it.
And look, I'll go ahead.
I would just like to weave something that you said about crises. Not like this is not an emergency replacement program, which will be hard for the utilities and the community-based organizations to disassociate themselves from. Everyone comes to their local agency or to their utility at crises. So I want to weave that in with something you said, Keith, about bringing in your other organizations. So I was at a conference last week, and our land bank in Michigan got like a huge grant for across Michigan to do blight homes. And Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac is like giving them foreclosed homes that still have people living in them, that they're going to work towards paying the people to leave, et cetera. But one of the state directors came to me and said, when you have this IRA thing down, please bring me to the table, because I think that your local land bank, us, can help you in facilitating some of your IRA angst, because they'll have the customer base, the home, the education process, and can do, I'm going to swear now, fuel switching, and can do all those things, right, at the level of the beginning of a project, where then it's not crises, it becomes a replacement or a change out, that everything should be in place. So look for those partners. I'm hoping to find more in Michigan. I know our WAP program, we're going to be deep involved with them, but WAP isn't our answer to spend all of our dollars. So look to your other community-based organizations that may be able to help you.
And the only thing I was going to say is that I know we've talked about a lot here today, and we've not even scratched the surface, right? I mean, these laws, the legislation alone is hundreds of pages. The guidance and applications are hundreds of pages. It's anxiety-inducing just to wade into that. So what I want to invite you to do is, if you're experiencing some of that anxiety, reach out to your CLEAResult program manager. They can get in touch with the IRA implementation team, and if we don't know the answer, we'll find it. But it's a pretty high velocity of how quickly this stuff is going to move once the funds are approved. So we've all gotten kind of lulled into this. slow motion car wreck. But it's going to speed up. It's going to speed up fast. So just want you to know that we're with you in this, and whatever road that takes. So don't hesitate to reach out.
If I can add one more, I'm sorry, I have so many thoughts. Because there's also a really big opportunity here. We've been laying out all of the complexities and probably causing some deer in headlights out there. But IRA requires the states to submit a market transformation plan. It's a central component to IRA that I think if you get to the table, you can influence, and there's things that aren't, beholden to cost effectiveness that you might be able to get embedded into those programs that help you for the long run. Because I think we all would like to get out of this space where we're continuously trying to get all of the low-hanging fruit in energy efficiency and move on to more, more opportunities to make impacts for consumers. So the more you get engaged on that, especially on the market transformation front, I think there's a real opportunity to benefit yourselves in the long run.
And I'll add to that as one final comment, and to highlight an example of a state that's actually using attribution and these frameworks to push their portfolio to another level. So Wisconsin is the only state that I've seen so far that has come out with they have a public comment period for their IRA program centered around attribution. And under ARA, Wisconsin used what I'll call a negotiated framework. The Focus on Energy is the third-party implementer there, and they ran all of the ARA rebates through their website rebate platform, but they only received credits for rebates that passed their cost-benefit analysis under ARA. For IRA, they have proposed that as one option, but they've also asked to receive full attribution for everything, recognizing that they're shifting what they offer and that programs are changing. And this gives them the space to try out new products, to do things that they wouldn't have been able to do under a cost-benefit analysis. And also, if they're able to do it under IRA, that means we work the kinks out with this funding, and we see programs grow and evolve in a new way after IRA is done. So I think that, just building off your point and providing an on-the-ground example for anyone that needs to see one, there's an order out that actually talks about this in less than 15 pages.
Well, I think this session was an hour. Yep. So we're all set. But thank you all to our panelists for joining today and sharing your expertise. As Keith said, everybody in this room doesn't know a lot about IRA, including all of us, and we're kind of all in this together. And definitely lean on us at CLEAResult for expertise, and for the many questions we don't know the answer to, we'll find an answer. So thank you all again, and a big hand to our panelists today.